The Johnson family had always been close-knit, bound by love, laughter, and a shared sense of adventure. So when their parents announced they were moving to a new neighborhood in a quiet suburban town, Marcus and Elijah didn't know what to expect. The brothers, Marcus, the energetic 16-year-old with an infectious smile, and Elijah, the thoughtful 18-year-old who preferred books over parties, had grown up in a bustling city full of noise, diversity, and endless possibilities. Leaving behind familiar streets and childhood friends wasn't easy, but they trusted their parents' decision. Their dad, a software engineer, had landed a promising job at a tech company nearby, while their mom, a nurse practitioner, was excited about working at the local hospital. "This is a fresh start for us," she said one evening as they packed boxes in their old apartment. "A chance to grow together as a family." Marcus nodded enthusiastically, already imagining all the cool places he'd explore in their new home. Elijah, on the other hand, stayed quiet, lost in thought. Change made him uneasy, but he kept his worries to himself. On the day of the move, the brothers helped carry furniture into their spacious new house. It was bigger than their previous apartment, with large windows that let sunlight pour in and a backyard perfect for practicing martial arts, a hobby they'd both loved since they were kids. Their parents encouraged them to pursue it, seeing how much joy and discipline it brought to their lives. Over the years, Marcus and Elijah had earned black belts in Taekwondo and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, often training side by side under the watchful eye of their instructor, Mr. Lee. As they unloaded the last few boxes from the moving truck, Marcus noticed a group of teenagers hanging out near the corner of the street. They looked bored, leaning against a rusty fence and chatting loudly. One of them stood out, a tall, lanky boy with messy blonde hair and a smirk plastered across his face. His name was Jake, though Marcus didn't know that yet. Jake's piercing gaze locked onto the Johnsons as they worked, and something about the way he stared sent a chill down Marcus's spine. "Hey, Elijah," Marcus called out, nudging his older brother. "Do you see those guys over there?" Elijah glanced up briefly before shrugging. "Yeah, I see them. Why?" "I don't know. They just seem kind of sketchy." Elijah chuckled softly, ruffling Marcus's hair. "We're in a new place. Let's not jump to conclusions. Besides, we've got enough to worry about without borrowing trouble." But Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. As the afternoon wore on, Jake and his friends continued to linger, occasionally glancing toward the Johnsons' house. At one point, Jake muttered something to the others and they burst into laughter. Though Marcus couldn't hear exactly what was said, the tone was unmistakable, mocking, dismissive, and tinged with hostility. Later that evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, the brothers sat on the front porch, sipping lemonade and watching fireflies dance in the twilight. "Do you think people here will be nice?" Marcus asked suddenly, breaking the comfortable silence. Elijah tilted his head, considering the question. "Some will be and some won't, but we can't let anyone define our experience here. We'll make this place feel like home no matter what." Marcus smiled, reassured by his brother's words. Yet deep down, he couldn't ignore the nagging sensation that Jake and his gang might pose a problem sooner or later. Little did they know their instincts were spot on, and the challenges ahead would test not only their strength but also their unity as brothers. Despite the unease creeping at the edges of their minds, Marcus and Elijah tried to focus on the positives. Their new house was beautiful, their school seemed decent, and there were parks and trails to explore. For now, life felt peaceful, but peace, they would soon discover, was fragile. And sometimes, all it took was one ignorant person to shatter it completely. The next morning, the sun rose bright and early, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Marcus woke up with a sense of excitement bubbling inside him. He couldn't wait to explore the neighborhood, eager to find his own little corner of this new world they'd landed in. After finishing breakfast, a quick bowl of cereal, he grabbed his bike and headed out, leaving Elijah still half asleep on the couch. As he pedaled down the quiet streets, Marcus took in everything around him. Rows of neatly trimmed lawns, flower, beds bursting with color, and kids playing hopscotch on driveways. It all seemed so different from the bustling city streets he was used to. For a moment, he felt hopeful. Maybe this place wouldn't be so bad after all. His ride eventually led him to a small park tucked between two cul-de-sacs. There was a playground with swings that creaked gently in the breeze, a baseball field where a group of kids practiced hitting balls, and a basketball court surrounded by chain-link fencing. That's where he saw them, Jake and his gang, lounging lazily on the benches as if they owned the place. Marcus hesitated for a second, unsure whether to turn back or keep going. But curiosity got the better of him. If he wanted to fit in here, he figured it wouldn't hurt to introduce himself. With a deep breath, he walked over, trying to look confident despite the knot forming in his stomach. "Hey," Marcus said, stopping a few feet away from the group. His voice came out steadier than he expected, though his heart was racing. "What's up?" Jake glanced up, his sharp blue eyes sizing Marcus up like a predator assessing its prey. The others followed suit, their expressions ranging from disinterest to outright hostility. For a brief moment, no one said anything, and the silence stretched awkwardly. "You're new around here, huh?" Jake finally spoke, his tone dripping with sarcasm. "Where'd you come from? Some big city full of noise?" Marcus nodded cautiously. "Yeah, we just moved here last week." Jake smirked, leaning back against the bench. "Well, welcome to the suburbs, kid. Things work a little differently here." He exchanged knowing looks with his friends who snickered under their breath. Not wanting to seem intimidated, Marcus forced a smile. "Cool. So, what do you guys usually do for fun around here?" This question seemed to amuse Jake even more. He stood up slowly, towering over Marcus, and began circling him like a shark closing in on its target. "Fun? Oh, we've got plenty of ways to stay entertained. But I don't think you'd understand." Marcus frowned, confused. "Why not?" Jake stopped in front of him, his smirk widening into something darker. "Because you're not exactly one of us." The way he emphasized those last three words sent a chill through Marcus's body. Before he could respond, Jake leaned closer, lowering his voice. "You know what I mean, right? Or should I spell it out for you?" It didn't take long for Marcus to realize what Jake was implying. His face flushed with anger, but he bit his tongue, refusing to give Jake the satisfaction of seeing him lose control. Instead, he took a step back, gripping the handlebars of his bike tightly. "I'm just trying to be friendly," Marcus said, his voice calm despite the storm brewing inside him. "If you don't want to talk, that's fine. No need to be rude about it." Jake laughed loudly, throwing his head back dramatically. "Friendly? You think being friendly is going to make us forget who you are?" He gestured vaguely at Marcus, his tone laced with venom. "Look at yourself. You don't belong here." The words hit Marcus like a punch to the gut, but he refused to let Jake see how much they stung. Clenching his fists, he turned away without another word and started walking toward his bike. As he mounted it, Jake called out behind him, his voice mocking. "Yeah, that's right. Run along, kid. Go back to wherever you came from." But Marcus didn't respond. He pedaled away as fast as he could, his chest tightening with every stroke. By the time he reached home, his hands were shaking, and tears threatened to spill from his eyes. He hated feeling weak, hated letting someone like Jake get under his skin. Still, he knew better than to confront him directly. Not yet, anyway. When Elijah saw the look on Marcus's face as he stormed into the living room, he immediately sat up straighter. Whoa, hold on. What happened?" he asked. Concern etched across his features. Marcus dropped onto the couch beside him, recounting the entire encounter. As he spoke, Elijah listened intently, his expression growing darker with each passing detail. When Marcus finished, Elijah placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "That guy sounds like trouble," Elijah said quietly. "But remember what Dad always says, don't stoop to their level. They're looking for a reaction, and giving them one only makes things worse." "I know," Marcus muttered, staring at the floor. "But it's hard not to feel angry when someone talks to you like that." Elijah sighed, nodding in agreement. "I get it. Trust me, I do. But reacting impulsively won't solve anything. We'll figure this out together, okay? Just promise me you won't go looking for trouble." Marcus hesitated before nodding reluctantly. He trusted Elijah's judgment, but part of him wondered if turning the other cheek would really work in a situation like this. Deep down, he hoped Jake and his gang would leave them alone, But something told him this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. Over the next couple of days, Marcus tried to push the incident to the back of his mind. He spent more time exploring the neighborhood, avoiding the park entirely. Occasionally, he'd catch glimpses of Jake and his crew hanging out near the corner store or skateboarding down empty streets, but he made sure to steer clear of them. Elijah, meanwhile, kept a close eye on his younger brother, sensing the tension simmering beneath the surface. He reminded Marcus of their martial arts training, emphasizing the importance of discipline and patience. "Our skills aren't just for fighting," Elijah often said. "They're for protecting ourselves and others when there's no other choice." Despite their efforts to stay out of trouble, the brothers couldn't shake the feeling that Jake's gang was watching them. Every now and then, they'd notice graffiti scrawled on walls or hear whispers from neighbors about those boys causing problems. It was as if Jake had marked them as targets, daring them to fight back. One afternoon, while Marcus was helping their mom plant flowers in the backyard, Elijah joined them, leaning casually against the fence. "You know," he said thoughtfully, "if Jake keeps pushing, we might have to stand our ground sooner than we think." Marcus looked up, surprised. "You're saying we should fight them?" "No," Elijah replied firmly. "I'm saying we prepare. Not because we want to, but because we need to protect ourselves and our family. If Jake crosses the line, we'll show him exactly who he's messing with." For the first time since the confrontation at the park, Marcus felt a flicker of hope. Maybe standing up to Jake wouldn't mean losing control or giving in to anger. Maybe it would mean showing him, and everyone else, that the Johnson brothers weren't afraid to defend what mattered most. The days that followed were anything but peaceful for the Johnson brothers. Jake and his gang seemed to have made it their mission to make life as difficult as possible for Marcus and Elijah. At first, the harassment was subtle, just enough to unsettle them without drawing too much attention. A rock would hit their front window late at night, startling the family awake. Their mailbox, once filled with letters and bills, now bore crude messages scrawled in permanent marker, words meant to insult, demean, and provoke. Elijah noticed these changes first. He'd wake up early each morning to jog around the block, a habit he'd picked up years ago to clear his mind. On one of those runs, he found their mailbox tipped over, its contents scattered across the driveway. Among the envelopes was a crumpled piece of paper with hateful phrases written on it. The handwriting was sloppy, but the intent was clear. When Elijah brought it inside, Marcus immediately recognized the tone. It matched the venom Jake had spat at him during their encounter at the park. "This is getting out of hand," Marcus muttered, pacing back and forth in frustration. "What are we supposed to do, just sit here and take it?" Elijah placed a calming hand on his brother's shoulder. "We document everything," he said firmly. "Every rock, every note, every incident. If this escalates further, we'll need proof." So they began keeping track. They took photos of the graffiti scratched onto their garage door, saved screenshots of anonymous text messages sent to their parents' phone. "Go back where you came from," and even recorded instances when Jake and his gang drove past their house, shouting insults from their car windows. It wasn't easy staying calm while being targeted so relentlessly, but both brothers understood the importance of restraint. Reacting impulsively could only make things worse. Despite their efforts to remain composed, the tension weighed heavily on them. Marcus, who had always been outgoing and carefree, found himself withdrawing. He stopped riding his bike around the neighborhood and avoided eye contact with anyone unfamiliar. Even school felt different. Though no one there openly bullied him, he couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every hallway glance, every whispered conversation, it all felt like part of some larger game designed to intimidate him. Elijah, on the other hand, channeled his frustration into action. After dinner each night, he'd retreat to the basement dojo, a small space they'd set up shortly after moving in. There, surrounded by training mats and punching bags, he practiced techniques he hadn't used in months. His movements were precise, deliberate, almost meditative. Sometimes Marcus joined him, and together they sparred, their bodies moving in perfect harmony. These sessions weren't just about physical preparation. They were a way to release pent-up emotions, to remind themselves that they were stronger than the hatred aimed at them. One evening, as they stretched on the mats, Elijah broke the silence. "You know, I've been thinking," he said, his voice low. "Jake doesn't understand what he's dealing with. He sees us as easy targets because he thinks we're scared or weak, but we're not." Marcus nodded slowly, his brow furrowed. "Yeah, but how do we show him without making things worse? We can't just fight them. It'll look bad for us, especially since we're new here." Elijah leaned back, resting his weight on his palms. "That's true, but maybe we don't have to fight them. Maybe we fight the fear they're trying to instill in us. If we stand our ground not violently but confidently, maybe they'll realize they can't break us." The idea lingered in Marcus's mind long after their training session ended. Confidence. That was something he'd lost recently, thanks to Jake's constant taunts. But hearing Elijah talk about standing firm reignited a spark within him. Maybe they didn't have to cower anymore. As the week wore on, the harassment grew bolder. One afternoon, while walking home from school, Marcus spotted Jake and his gang loitering near the entrance to their cul-de-sac. They were leaning against a parked car, smoking cigarettes and laughing loudly. When they saw Marcus approaching, their laughter died down, replaced by smirks and snickers. "Look who's back," Jake called out, flicking his cigarette to the ground. "Thought you'd learned your lesson already." Marcus froze, gripping the straps of his backpack tighter. He wanted nothing more than to run, to disappear, but he forced himself to keep walking. "Leave me alone," he said evenly, his voice barely above a whisper. Jake pushed off the car, stepping closer until he was towering over Marcus. "Or what?" he sneered. "You gonna cry again? Run home to your big brother?" Behind him, the rest of the gang laughed, egging Jake on. Marcus clenched his fists, adrenaline coursing through his veins. He knew he could defend himself. He'd trained for years, but starting a fight here in broad daylight wouldn't solve anything. Instead, he locked eyes with Jake, letting his glare speak for him. "I'm warning you," Marcus said, his voice steadier now. "Don't push me." For a split second, Jake looked surprised. Perhaps he hadn't expected such defiance, but then his smirk returned, wider and crueler than before. "Oh, I'm shaking," he mocked, taking another step forward. "What are you gonna do, huh? Hit me?" The air between them crackled with tension. Marcus's heart pounded in his chest and his muscles coiled like springs ready to strike. But just as Jake raised his fist, a car horn blared nearby, startling everyone. A neighbor driving by slowed down to peer curiously at the scene. Seizing the opportunity, Marcus stepped back, turned, and walked away, leaving Jake fuming behind him. When Marcus got home, Elijah was waiting in the living room. One look at his brother's flushed face told him everything he needed to know. "They confronted you again, didn't they?" Elijah asked, his tone gentle but firm. Marcus nodded, sinking onto the couch. "I don't think they're going to stop, Eli. Not unless we do something about it." Elijah sat beside him, his expression thoughtful. "You're right. Ignoring them isn't working, but neither is fighting back blindly. We need a plan, one that shows them we're not afraid, but doesn't put us in a position where we lose control." Over the next few days, the brothers brainstormed strategies. They agreed that avoiding conflict entirely wasn't an option anymore, but neither was resorting to violence unless absolutely necessary. What they needed was a way to assert themselves, to send a message loud and clear that the Johnsons weren't going anywhere. Their opportunity came sooner than expected. Late one evening, as the brothers finished dinner, they heard footsteps crunching on gravel outside. Peering through the blinds, they saw Jake and two of his friends lingering near their driveway. They weren't doing anything overtly threatening, just standing there staring at the house, but their presence was unmistakably menacing. Elijah grabbed a flashlight and headed outside, Marcus close behind him. "Can we help you guys with something?" Elijah asked, his voice calm but commanding. Jake smirked, crossing his arms. "Just checking out the neighborhood," he replied nonchalantly. "Making sure everything's in order." Elijah stepped closer, his posture relaxed but alert. Well, everything's fine here. No need to worry. For a moment, the two groups stood facing each other, the air thick with unspoken challenges. Then, without another word, Jake turned and walked away, his friends trailing behind him. As they disappeared into the shadows, Elijah exhaled deeply, glancing at Marcus. That was close, Marcus admitted, his voice trembling slightly. It won't be the last time, Elijah said grimly. But we handled it. And next time, we'll be ready. Though the confrontation ended peacefully, it left both brothers uneasy. Jake's behavior was escalating, and it was clear he wasn't done yet. The question wasn't whether he'd strike again, it was when. And when he did, the Yao Johnson brothers knew they'd have to face him head-on. The tension in the air had been building for days like a storm waiting to break. Jake and his gang were everywhere, lingering near the Johnsons' house, driving past slowly with smirks plastered across their faces, or whispering loudly just within earshot whenever Marcus and Elijah ventured outside. It was as if they were testing boundaries, seeing how far they could push before the brothers snapped. One afternoon, while returning from the grocery store, Marcus and Elijah found themselves walking through a narrow alleyway that served as a shortcut between the main road and their neighborhood. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows across the cracked pavement. The brothers carried bags of groceries, chatting idly about plans for dinner, when suddenly the sound of footsteps echoed behind them. At first, they thought nothing of it, a neighbor perhaps, or someone cutting through the same path. But then the footsteps grew louder, faster, until they were surrounded. Jake stepped into view, flanked by 4 others from his gang. Their expressions were cold, almost predatory, as they formed a loose semicircle around the brothers, blocking any escape route. "Well, well," Jake drawled, his voice dripping with mockery. "Look who we've got here, the new kids." Marcus stiffened, instinctively stepping closer to Elijah. His grip tightened on the grocery bag he was holding, knuckles turning white. Elijah, however, remained calm, his posture relaxed but alert. He scanned the group quickly, taking note of their positions and body language. They weren't armed, at least not visibly, but their sheer numbers made the situation dangerous. "What do you want, Jake?" Elijah asked, his tone steady despite the rising tension. "We're just trying to get home." Jake chuckled darkly, shaking his head. "Oh, I think you know exactly what I want. You two have been strutting around this neighborhood like you own the place, like you belong here." He took a step forward, narrowing the gap between them. "But let me make something crystal clear. You don't. And if you don't leave on your own, we'll make sure you regret staying." Elijah's jaw tightened, but he didn't rise to the bait. Instead, he locked eyes with Jake, his gaze unwavering. "You don't want to do this," he said evenly. "This isn't going to end well for anyone." Jake laughed, throwing his head back dramatically. "Oh, please. Spare me the tough guy act. We all know you're just a couple of cowards, too." Scared to fight back. Beside him, Marcus shifted uncomfortably, his heart pounding in his chest. He wanted to lash out, to shut Jake up once and for all, but he remembered Elijah's advice. Patience. Reacting impulsively would only play into Jake's hands. Still, standing there silently felt unbearable. Jake seemed to sense their hesitation. His smirk widened and he gestured lazily at his friends. "See? I told you they wouldn't dare try anything. They're too weak, too afraid to stand up for themselves." Elijah's voice cut through the tension like a blade. "Afraid?" he repeated, his tone sharp enough to silence Jake mid-sentence. "You think we're afraid of you?" For a moment, Jake looked taken aback. Then his expression hardened, and he stepped even closer, close enough that Elijah could see the flecks of anger in his eyes. "Yeah, that's right. Afraid of me. Of us. Because if you're not, maybe you should be." The challenge hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Marcus glanced at Elijah, searching for some sign of what to do next. Should they back down? Walk away? Or should they finally show Jake exactly who he was dealing with? Elijah didn't hesitate. With a slow, deliberate motion, He set the grocery bag down on the ground. Then, without breaking eye contact with Jake, he spoke again. "Let's get one thing straight," he said, his voice low but firm. "We didn't come here looking for trouble. But if you keep pushing, if you keep threatening us and our family, we won't hesitate to defend ourselves." Jake scoffed, rolling his eyes. "Defend yourselves against what, me?" He spread his arms wide, laughing mockingly. "Go ahead, tough guy. Show me what you've got." It was a trap, and Elijah knew it. If they threw the first punch, Jake would use it as an excuse to justify whatever came next. But at the same time, backing down now would only embolden him further. They needed to find a middle ground, a way to assert themselves without crossing the line. Before Elijah could respond, Marcus stepped forward, surprising everyone, including himself. "You don't know who you're messing with," he said, his voice trembling but resolute. "If you really want to find out, fine, but don't say we didn't warn you." Jake blinked, momentarily caught off guard by Marcus's sudden boldness. Then his smirk returned, darker and more menacing than before. "Oh, I'm shaking," he sneered. "Big talk for little boys." Elijah placed a hand on Marcus's shoulder, pulling him back slightly. "Enough," he said quietly, his gaze still fixed on Jake. "We're done here. Come on, Marcus." Without waiting for a response, Elijah picked up the grocery bag and started walking past Jake, brushing shoulders with him as he moved. Marcus hesitated for a second, glaring daggers at Jake, before following his brother's lead. As they walked away, Jake called after them, his voice laced with venom. "This isn't over," he shouted. "You hear me? This isn't over." Once they were safely out of the alley and back on the main road, Marcus exhaled deeply, his legs feeling like jelly. "That was insane," he muttered, glancing over his shoulder to ensure they weren't being followed. "What are we supposed to do now?" Elijah stopped walking and turned to face him, his expression serious. "We prepare," he said simply. "Jake isn't going to stop, not unless we give him a reason to. And if it comes down to it, we'll show him exactly what happens when you underestimate someone." Marcus nodded, though doubt lingered in his mind. "Do you really think it'll come to that, a fight?" "I hope not," Elijah admitted. "But we can't afford to be unprepared. Not anymore." When they got home, the brothers immediately retreated to the basement dojo. The space felt different tonight, charged with energy, as if the walls themselves were bracing for what lay ahead. Elijah lit the overhead lamp, illuminating the training mats and punching bags. Without saying a word, he began stretching, moving, through familiar routines designed to sharpen reflexes and build focus. Marcus joined him moments later, mimicking his movements. For the next hour, they practiced drills together, sparring lightly, working on defensive maneuvers, and rehearsing techniques they hadn't used in months. Each strike, each block, carried a weight beyond physicality. It was preparation for something bigger, something inevitable. As they trained, Elijah spoke softly, his words punctuated by the rhythmic thud of fists meeting pads. "Remember why we're doing this," he reminded Marcus. "Not because we want to hurt anyone, but because we need to protect ourselves and our family. This isn't about revenge, it's about standing our ground." Marcus nodded, sweat dripping down his forehead. "I get it," he said, his voice steadier now. "But what if people blame us? What if they say we started it?" "Then we'll deal with that when it happens," Elijah replied firmly. "Right now, our priority is making sure Jake understands that we're not afraid of him or anyone else." By the time they finished their session, exhaustion had settled into their muscles, but their minds felt clearer. They knew the confrontation was coming. It was only a matter of when and where. And when it did happen, they vowed to face it together, united not just as brothers, but as fighters prepared to defend what mattered most. As they climbed the stairs, back to the living room, the weight of the day's events pressed heavily on them. Yet amidst the uncertainty, one truth stood firm. No matter what Jake and his gang threw at them, the Johnson brothers would stand tall. Because sometimes courage isn't about avoiding conflict, it's about facing it head-on with dignity and strength. The days that followed the alleyway confrontation felt like a ticking clock. each moment bringing them closer to an inevitable showdown. Jake's words echoed in their minds. This isn't over, a promise that hung heavy in the air. Marcus and Elijah knew they couldn't afford to be caught off guard again. Preparation wasn't just about physical readiness. It was about mental fortitude, strategy, and unity. Every evening after school, the brothers retreated to their basement dojo. The space had always been a sanctuary for them, a place where stress melted away under the rhythm of kicks, punches, and controlled breathing. But now it took on a new purpose. It became a battleground before the real battle, a testing ground for every possible scenario they might face. Their training intensified, fueled by determination and the knowledge that Jake wouldn't back down easily. Elijah led most of the sessions, his years of experience shining through as he guided Marcus with precision. Focus, he instructed one night, circling Marcus as they sparred lightly. Anticipate their moves before they make them. Remember, Jake's gang isn't trained like we are. They'll rely on brute force, not skill. Marcus nodded, dodging a mock punch and countering with a swift kick aimed at Elijah's side. His movements were sharp, but Elijah blocked effortlessly, demonstrating how to adjust stance mid-motion. Good, Elijah said, stepping back momentarily. But don't get cocky. Even untrained fighters can land lucky hits if you let your guard down. They practiced combinations designed to neutralize multiple opponents quickly. Elijah emphasized efficiency over aggression, teaching Marcus techniques to incapacitate without causing serious harm. Our goal isn't to hurt them, he reminded him repeatedly. It's to stop them from hurting us or anyone else. Between sparring drills, they reviewed footage of past tournaments they'd competed in, analyzing strategies and tactics. Elijah pointed out moments where Marcus could have improved his footwork or timing. See this? He asked, pausing the video on a frame where Marcus had hesitated during a match. That split second cost you the advantage. Against Jake's gang, hesitation could mean everything. Marcus leaned forward, studying the screen intently. Got it, he said, nodding. No second guessing. As the hours passed, their focus sharpened, their bodies moving almost instinctively. Yet beyond the physical preparation, there was another layer to their training, one rooted in mindset. Elijah often spoke about controlling emotions, especially anger. Jake wants to provoke us, he explained. He thrives on chaos, on seeing people lose control. If we let rage take over, we're playing right into his hands. To reinforce this lesson, they incorporated meditation into their routine. Sitting cross-legged on the mats, they closed their eyes and focused on their breathing, letting go of tension and frustration. At first, Marcus struggled to quiet his racing thoughts, but over time he found peace in the stillness. It wasn't just calming, it was empowering. He realized that true strength came not from overpowering others, but from mastering oneself. While they trained, Jake and his gang continued their campaign of intimidation. Late-night drives past the house became more frequent, accompanied by loud music and taunts hurled out car windows. One morning, the Johnsons discovered their front lawn littered with empty soda cans and fast food wrappers, a crude attempt to claim their property as some kind of territory. Another day, someone spray-painted derogatory slurs on the sidewalk, leading up to their driveway. Each incident fueled the brothers' resolve. Instead of reacting impulsively, they documented everything meticulously, snapping photos and jotting down notes. Their parents noticed the change in their demeanor, how Marcus no longer seemed withdrawn, and how Elijah carried himself with quiet confidence. When questioned, the brothers reassured them that they were handling things responsibly, though they kept details vague to avoid worrying them further. One evening, as they wrapped up their training session, Elijah sat on the mat, stretching his legs while Marcus grabbed water bottles from the mini fridge in the corner. "Do you think Jake knows what he's walking into?" Marcus asked suddenly, unscrewing the cap of his bottle. Elijah smirked faintly, taking a sip of water. "Probably not. Guys like him underestimate everyone until it's too late. He has no idea what we're capable of. But won't he figure it out eventually? I mean, he's got to suspect something." "He might," Elijah admitted. "But even if he does, it won't matter. By the time he realizes, it'll already be over. We just need to stay one step ahead. Their conversations often turned strategic, dissecting potential scenarios and planning responses. What if Jake brought more people? What if they attacked unexpectedly? How would they protect their parents if things escalated inside the house? These questions weren't hypothetical. They were practical considerations born out of necessity. As part of their preparation, Elijah taught Marcus situational awareness, how to read body language, identify weaknesses, and anticipate threats. During walks around the neighborhood, he quizzed Marcus on subtle cues. What does that guy's posture tell you? Is he relaxed or tense? Could he be carrying something hidden? At first, Marcus struggled to pick up on these details, but with practice, his instincts sharpened. He began noticing things he'd overlooked before, the way Jake's gang tended to cluster together for safety, or how Jake himself avoided direct eye contact unless trying to intimidate. These observations gave them valuable insight into their adversaries' behavior patterns. Despite their intense focus, the brothers made time for lighter moments too. Laughter broke through the tension occasionally, reminding them that they were still teenagers navigating a complicated world. One night, after a particularly grueling session, Marcus collapsed onto the mat, groaning dramatically. I swear my legs are going to fall off, he joked, rubbing his sore calves. Elijah chuckled, tossing him a towel. Welcome to the life of a black belt. No pain, no gain. You sound like Mr. Lee, Marcus teased, referring to their
martial arts instructor back in the city. Hey, the man knows what he's talking about, Elijah shot back, smiling.
Besides, you'll thank me later when you're kicking Jake's butt. The comment lightened the mood, but beneath the humor lay a sobering truth. The confrontation was coming, and soon. Neither brother doubted it. Jake's bravado masked a simmering anger, one that would boil over sooner rather than later. In the days leading up to the inevitable clash, the brothers fortified their resolve. They rehearsed escape routes in case things went south, identified safe houses where they could seek refuge if necessary, and ensured their phones were fully charged at all times. Every precaution was taken, every detail accounted for. Yet amidst all the planning, Elijah reminded Marcus, and himself, that their strength didn't lie solely in their ability to fight. It stemmed from their bond as brothers, from the values instilled in them by their parents, and from the discipline they'd cultivated through years of martial arts training. They weren't preparing for war. They were preparing to defend their dignity, their family, and their right to live peacefully. On the eve of what felt like the calm before the storm, the brothers sat together in the dojo, the soft hum of the overhead lamp filling the silence. Whatever happens tomorrow, Elijah said quietly, breaking the stillness, we face it together. No matter what. Marcus looked at him, his expression resolute. Together, he echoed. And with that, they rose, extinguished the lights, and climbed the stairs, ready to meet whatever challenges awaited them head-on.